Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey, and today I am joined by Adam McPadden and Gordon Horner from Vermont Green Castle Reserve in Johnson. Gentlemen, thank you for both being here with me today.
Morning.
Yeah, I'm glad to connect finally. Before we get started, would you both mind doing a 5-minute life story for the viewers here?
Go
Gordy,
ahead,
why don't you
Adam.
go first?
You want me to go first?
Sure,
Yeah, I'll
please.
defer to my elders in these things.
Just a second here. I got something that popped up on the screen. Okay, so I was actually born and brought up right in Johnson. My family had well, they used to call them like truck garden. They used to sell vegetables and stuff. And then my parents went into the greenhouse nursery business. So I kind of grew up in the nursery business, right up through until I started work for IBM. I had 45 years with IBM, just retired.
Jeez.
I retired in October. I love the growing aspect. And I think Adam will testify this isn't like growing your average tomato plant for sure. There's a lot of science into growing cannabis. So it's really been fun, challenging, fun, exciting to see, the end crop going forward. We've had a blast. Right now I live in Underhill. I've been here for 22 years with my wife and two sons. So that's
What were you doing at IBM, Gordon?
I was in supply chain management. Yeah. So went through a lot of the COVID supply chain issues that we were having. Went through that with IBM right up until I retired. So it was a real fun job. It was kind of a fast pace, fighting problems every day. I was a team lead and kind of like led the team on problem solving and
Putting out fires.
putting out fires. Yeah. So it was a great job. I'm 65, and decided, I've been with the company long enough, and then one of my sons, hey Dad, what about growing cannabis? And that's kind of led us down this path where we're at right now. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Adam, would you care to go next?
Cool. I'm much younger than Gordy at 55, but similarly born and raised in Vermont, high school, Brattleboro, college, UVM. I did a stint in the Navy on an aircraft carrier before going to UVM, stationed overseas. That was a blast. That was a great way to kind of see the world and get a lot of life experience in there and check out how other people do things, Then did UVM, and from there I went right into working at IBM in Essex. And I was there for 27 years, also retired last year, which is where I met Gordy. We became good friends, and kind of seeing as we're retiring, decided, hey, why don't we do this joint thing together and get into this cannabis growing business? And it really has been a blast. It's been nice to get away from a desk and a computer and actually do things hands-on, which is awesome. And that's what got us into this, and we're full steam ahead.
Awesome. Would you care to dive into your military experience at all? I love always asking veterans about their service.
Yeah, I got out of. I knew I wanted to go to college, wasn't quite ready out of high school, so joined up in the Navy, stationed on an aircraft carrier, USS Midway, and the home for that was Japan, Yokosuka, Japan. So when we went out to sea, we went all over Southeast Asia, Australia, Africa. We went home, it was back to Japan. So you were always away from the U.S. unless you just came home for a vacation. But it was a great way to live in another culture and see how different people live, and um, in the environments there. Working in the Navy was pretty disciplined. It is what it is, and you do what you're told by and large. But for me, it was a great way as a young guy to go out and see the world. Make some money, check out other people. As I said, worked on the flight deck. I worked in a squadron of A6s. So we spent a lot of time up on the flight deck as opposed to way down in the bowels of the ship, which is where I'd prefer to be topside anyway. And that was nice. I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. For people that are kind of not sure where they're going, they're young, they don't know what's what. It's a great way to see the world and make some cash.
I wish they would let you guys smoke the cannabis
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I didn't see a lot of that while I was there, but a lot of the people that I work with had been there from like the 70s and stuff, and you hear stories about what used to go on back in certain times, and it was around. But when I was there, which is the late 80s, just didn't see it very much. It wasn't forefront. I don't know if it's because they cracked down or whatever, but um, it wasn't a big thing right then.
Mm. I bet it's a little different now.
Yeah, probably is. Probably is. They
A
used to
lot
do
of
random piss tests on us, so they
mm,
were checking for it.
yeah, yeah. What a bummer.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted to ask you guys, who's the grower here?
Gordy?
Well, it's definitely, I think, shared adventure. Okay. Um, like I said, I've got a lot of experience with growing, but not the experience that goes into cannabis. So we've done a lot of learning, and we've had help. We have Cannacrib. We're actually as far as I know, Adam, right, the only grower in the state that's using Cannacrib as a consulting firm.
Yep.
And those guys are totally awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
we can get a hold of them on the spur of the moment, any time of the day. And if we got a question, we can get to them and they respond right back quickly. So it's been a great partnership with Cannacrib.
Where are they from? I've never heard of them.
They're out of, well, I think where Arizona is where their business is, right, Adam?
I think the headquarters, if
Yeah,
Growers House and Cannacribs are kind of together, it's got one CEO, one owner. Just Google them, and they're from out west.
yeah.
Awesome.
And their team is actually Arizona, Canada, California. So there's a real nice blend of experience there. And there's sometimes on the phone we may have 4 or 5 guys
Nice.
working with us and going through maybe problems that we're seeing, or even things that we just asked that aren't problems, right? They have got a huge amount of knowledge and wealth there. And like I said, they are so good to work with. It's just incredible. They're not, it's well worth the money we spent to not make mistakes, right in our first grow, because we spent a lot of money to have a state of the art. We're not big, but it is state of the art grow facility, and they've been right there as a partnership, hand in hand with us as we went through our first grow.
And now, I understand you guys have sort of repurposed like your family business is some greenhouses here, and you said you've got sort of a state-of-the-art facility. I'd love to hear sort of about your build out process.
Well, the building itself was actually an old showroom that we use. So it was stick built. Um, we went inside it and basically completely, we worked with Efficiency Vermont.
Oh, nice.
They gave us some help. And we went inside it and basically created a tomb inside it. We sprayed insulation foam on the inside of the building. We strapped it all out. We put steel up ceiling. So when you walk into the inside of the building, it looks like a brand new state of the art building on the inside. I'm going to let Adam talk about what's inside it because he is our engineer, and the equipment stuff that we use, he's very knowledgeable. So go ahead, Adam, talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about like what kind of lights you're running or
Yeah.
whatever you care to
Yeah.
share about your gear, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Once we got past the kind of the building structure itself, which Gordy was talking about with Efficiency Vermont's help and some others, now we had to kind of equip it, and we did a ton of research on what are the big commercial outfits using, what's kind of state of the art, what's the best equipment, what's the highest efficiency, because we're in this for the long game. We wanted to get efficient equipment. So we started with lights, did a lot of research on lights. We ended up going with full spectrum HLG Scorpion Diablos. And these things, they're 600 watters. And we've got 25 of them, all tiered throughout the grow room. So we
And
picked
you
those
guys,
lights.
sorry to interrupt you, but you said you had a tier 1 indoor. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Carry on.
Yep. So we went with the HLG Scorpion Diablos. They had a great spectrum range. They had really impressive efficiency numbers. So we went with those. For heating and cooling, we've went with Mitsubishi Train, got a nice heat pump in there, low temperature heat pump, and some AC units, um, duct work into the building. For nutrients and fertigation, we're using dosatrons into stock tanks. So it's kind of automated. You mix up your stock tanks for whatever your feed solutions are. You set your dosatron settings appropriately, and you let the water flow, and it pulls up automatically, mixes it to the right amount. And so that's been really slick. We're really glad we went with that method for feeding things.
Yeah, the dosatrons are
For
nice.
Yeah, for the controls, we went with Trollmaster. We did the Hydro X Pro, which is kind of the brains behind everything, and into that we feed the sensors throughout the room for CO2, for humidity, for temperature, for light, and it contacts all of the different pieces of equipment and adjusts them appropriately on the fly based on what you've programmed.
Sure.
So that we've kind of automated that. I like the Trollmaster. I like the remote access capability. So if I'm someplace else in the country and Gordy calls and says, "Hey, something's going wrong here. The CO2 is out of whack," I can log in on my phone and see what it's doing and make some changes on the fly. So we went with that equipment there. So we tried to stick with high quality, high efficiency, reliable equipment, and that's been going very well for us. For benches, we use Botanicare sliding benches, 5-foot sliding benches, so that we don't have to have a fixed aisle between each bench, and we can kind of
Sure.
maximize our canopy ceiling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So that's what we did for all the equipment, and in our second grow, well along into our second grow now, it's been working great. We did have to learn how to program things up and how to optimize things, but that's kind of just normal growing pains. I think whenever you equip a new building for something, there's always some things maybe you didn't think of, but those were easy to get around, and things are running pretty streamlined right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I got to say, this kind of technological advancements here seem to be like, in a way, it sort of drives me nuts. But in a way, like if in certain cases like this, it seems pretty cool where you could be in California and you could just hop on your phone and like change your light settings or something like that. Like that seems, for a business owner, that seems amazing.
Yeah. And there's a labor aspect to it too. There's only a few of us and we're not always available all the time. We may not be around. And even though we're a tier 1, there's a lot of freaking work to growing cannabis and canopy management and pest and disease and all of that. And just containing all of that labor, as much as we could automate and still achieve what we wanted, we really wanted to leverage that from a technology perspective and allow us more time to get hands-on with the plants. We really needed that.
Sure, yeah, and yeah, I hate to like automate away jobs, but at a certain point, like you don't need some people to do this. And like these operations seem like the overhead is really um significant. And so keeping labor costs down seems like it's kind of critical here.
It is, and we are our labor. The 4 people that own this business we are the labor force. And as we look to the future and talk about expanding and growing, realistically, we're probably gonna have to change that. We'll have to hire on and expand
Sure.
and have some dedicated employees. But we're, as much as we can for the size we're at now, we're trying to contain it all within our own capabilities.
Well, and that's something something I've been commenting on along lately a lot on is sort of some of these businesses come into the market and they immediately scale up to this massive size without necessarily having the team in place that can handle that kind of operation or the growing experience. And then, 2 years later, when they're losing money and they're laying people off and people are losing their jobs, I kind of like your approach here. Start small, figure it out. If you need help after that, then you can add it on, because what I've seen is a lot of people just getting laid off recently, right before the holidays. by these companies who just scaled up too quickly, and that really, I think, is detrimental to their workforce and their employees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I believe too is that what we have done with using technology, and really Adam and I are both tech guys, right? I mean, we've worked for a tech company for years, right? So we have that experience. And what I see happening is that if you don't do this, I think a company is going to struggle, really struggle, because we still have our own challenges in that grow room, okay, on a daily basis with issues, right? And if you're not using whatever's out there for technology to kind of keep you out of trouble, you're going to get in trouble. That's what I see with cannabis, right? And doing the right thing, because where we want to end up, we want to really, and I keep saying this, I want to become a craft business, okay? I want to be a heady topper down the road where I have a product that everybody wants, right? And there's not enough of it, right? I think that's where we want to be, you know, especially with the size of our grow right now that we have, right? We only have 500 square feet of canopy in
Oh,
there.
really? You're only
Yeah.
using half of your 1,000?
Well, the building is 900, okay?
Okay.
And then we're doing everything in there. Our mothers are in there, so we've lost the table just with mothers. You know, we trim, we buck, we do everything in that room, right? Our clones are in there. So you have to be as efficient as possible to make this a viable business, right? And that's kind of where we're at, and that's what we're doing to maximize that growth space.
Yeah, for sure. And the sliding tables, it seems like, are a huge help in terms of
Oh,
maximizing your space.
those things are really sweet. They're really worth the money. Again, we spent a lot of money, right, for that small building that we
How
have.
much? Do you care to put a number on it?
180.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And that's out of our pockets. That's just money that we didn't get investors. We didn't go to banks for that. This was what we had saved up in the bank ourselves over the years. So this is right out of our pockets.
Well,
So
you can't go to banks, can you? Nobody's getting financing for these businesses yet, are they?
I don't know that. I don't know that.
I know the banking has been a big issue, and that's certainly something I wanted to ask you guys about, because I don't know if you guys have looked into the Safe Banking Act, but that was a big story here recently. Although I read it, I thought it was kind of not super helpful. It helped big businesses and banks, I think, more than small businesses who actually need those loans to maybe get their businesses started. It seems like the people screaming about they need access to more money are the people who already have a ton of it. And so I was wondering how the banking experience has gone for you guys.
Um, I we worked through the SECU, right? We were one of the fortunate ones, because I think there's issues now where we were able to get our checking and stuff. We
Yeah,
got
they stopped taking accounts there for a minute. I don't know
That's
where
right.
they're
I
at.
don't know if they've started again or not, but they've been excellent to work with. Some of their fees are kind of expensive, but at this point in time, they're one of the few players that are available, right? So we kind of have to roll with the punches, and make sure we've at least got a checking and savings account, and that's all part of getting your license, right?
Right.
So they've been good to work with, and we haven't had any issues.
Cool.
Maybe one thing that just came up is we had a debit card through them, but Visa is the company, and as of the end of the year, they canceled our debit card.
Yeah.
Because it's federal, I guess. I don't understand 100%, but they canceled our debit card. So
Curious.
yeah, yeah.
I was hoping
And
the Safe Act
it wasn't
would
because of
help that.
them. It was because of Visa, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, so that's another challenge that we'll have to work through, right? We still have our, banking, checking, savings, direct deposit, all those kind of, I can pay through through the checking account and stuff like that with bill pay and stuff. So we're okay. But hopefully this gets easier as time goes on, dealing with this kind of stuff.
Adam, it sounded like you were going to say something there about the safe banking.
Well, I was hoping the Safe Act might address concerns like Visa and MasterCard that would enable people to use debit cards, because it's just so convenient to be able to, when you need to buy equipment or you need to buy supplies on an ongoing basis, to be able to go online and do that as opposed to
Certainly. And I
cash.
think, oh, sorry to cut you off. I think that is actually, I read the Safe Banking Act. It was about 7 pages. Um, and I think that was the one upside, really, was that it would allow these other financial services and payment processing companies to come in and start. Now you can start using plastic,
Yeah.
which I think would be nice for business owners. One, because you don't have as much cash on hand. And two, for exactly what you just said, because now through the Safe Banking Act, if it passed in its current form, it would say, hey, your money is no longer, this is still federally illegal technically, but your money is no longer going to be counted as the proceeds of a, illicit drug transaction or whatever the language was, which I think would be super helpful to people, especially, people who are trying to get loans and get businesses off the ground.
Yeah, 100%. Because people are going to need loans. I mean, that's a big challenge right now because people want to expand and do other things. And how do you do that?
Yeah, right. And it's like people want to expand, but people also just want to get their company started. People who had like small dreams are still having trouble getting that, which really, it feels to me, I know it's still federally illegal, but we've all like, right. We live in a legal state. It feels slightly discriminatory towards cannabis businesses, where every other type of like agricultural business could have access to these services, or every type of like any business really. Um, any thoughts on that, guys?
I think the ball and chain of cannabis being included in the illegal drugs that were defined way back in the Nixon days is still dragging us down in that respect. If we can cut that chain, and I think the momentum's happening. I mean, you look at state by state what's happening all over the country, it's going that direction. And even if you listen to senators and House reps, the and look at and listen to their wording, yeah, there's still some old school hell no, but more and more it's going to be why not, let's do this. So I think the momentum's moving in that direction. It's just not moving as fast as we would like, and my expectation is it will get there. I just can't tell you when.
I wish I could tell you. Like a year ago I would have told you we're still looking at like 10 years, but now it's a year later and I'm like, boy, this might happen in 2 years. It seems like for sure the momentum is shifted. And even states like New Hampshire, for example, who has refused to take up a bill on this and is now surrounded on all sides by other people, selling cannabis. And even the staunchest prohibitionists over there are having to like see the writing on the wall,
Yeah. Yep, 100%.
It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the next 5 years or so. And my computer just said my connection's unstable. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah, you kind of froze for a minute and then
Yeah.
Okay,
I saw
cool.
that too. You froze for a minute, but you're good now.
Okay, cool. What else did I wanted to ask you guys about the application process. I don't know which one of you handled that or if maybe it was some of your partners, but I'd like to know how the application process went for you guys.
Gordy, why don't you start and then I can talk about fire marshal and plumbing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes,
Actually, my beautiful bride is one of the partners. She actually did a lot of that legwork for us. Okay. The problem, I guess, if there was any problem, as far as I'm concerned, was they kept coming to us asking, "Oh, you need to do this." We'd give them that information. A week later, they come back, "You need to have this." They kept coming back and piecemealing us, and instead of somebody going through the application and then come back and say, "These are the things you got left to do before we can consider your application." Okay. So I think if I had one gripe, it was that process where we kept thinking, right, we were supposed to have a go the 1st of May, right? And we were one of the lucky ones because we got our go the end of June, right? So
I was gonna say I feel like I saw your license pop up a while ago.
Yeah. So we were one of the lucky ones, but again, if my wife, again, she's technical too, and had the experience with these applications and getting stuff done and getting the information, I'm sure there's a lot of guys that really struggled out there and they may not even still have their licenses, right?
Yep,
But I
correct.
think, I think the biggest problem, I think if there was anything, it was they didn't have anybody. It just went in there and looked at things and say, I need X, Y, and Z for you to get your license. They kept giving me,
They would give you
X.
X. They would give you X, and you had to do that, and then come back, and then they would
Yeah,
give you Y instead of
yeah,
giving it all at the same time. Is what you're saying?
exactly. So, um, I guess that's my only gripe with
Yeah, and
all,
necessarily, I
along with
wasn't.
it was late, right? We were ready. We had our grow facility ready to go May 1st.
Yeah,
So we'd spent all this money, right? And the thing is sitting there now, and we can't put a plant in it, right?
and you're already having if you already set up like a well, I guess you got VSECU, so you're not paying the monthly fee if but yeah, even to keep the lights on in there, I mean, I imagine it would cost you some money, and it's just sitting there, huh?
Yeah, it was all just sitting there, right? And okay, when we going? When we going? And every time we would get another request, within 24 hours, we'd give them the information, and then we'd sit another week, and then they'd come back and say, "Oh, I need this now." So, and again, I think we were one of the lucky ones, but that
And
could have
I know
been.
back then they were kind of understaffed back when they first started rolling out the applications. So I
Yeah,
do give them a little bit of a break because it seemed like the house really didn't give them the resources they needed to staff
yeah,
themselves fully,
I
which
agree. I
which
agree.
I think would have helped everybody a lot in that process.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree.
Mm.
Yeah. And so that was the application piece, all the requirements, working with the fire marshal's department, working with the inspectors, plumbing, electrical, architects, to make sure that we did things by building code. I'll say nobody's got all the staffing they want, but in some of those, just getting people's time took longer than we would have liked. However, everybody was really helpful, whether it was at least in our case, for the fire marshal, the plumbing, electrical, architects, it was, we didn't run into anybody saying, throwing up roadblocks because they didn't like this business or didn't want to be part of it or didn't want to help us. We got really good feedback and support from all of those areas. So I think the state is doing a good job, at least in our case, with seeing what we did and pointing out anything we needed to change, and then in a fairly timely manner being available to inspect it and sign off on it. So I'm giving kudos to kind of the state engineers and the state inspectors, at least that we worked with through this. That was kind of a good story. I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but for us, it went pretty well.
Cool. And I'd like to ask you about some of those inspectors. Like, I don't know if you could tell me the name of the local fire marshal or who you worked with for like engineers or architects. But I'd love to hear about some of those people.
Yeah, okay. So now we're going to be stressing my memory here. Going by fire marshal, I think the guy we worked with was Ryan Arenberg. Um, and I don't remember what office he's out of, but he was kind of central to this. So he was good, and you can call these people up directly and
Yeah.
leave, if you can't get them on the phone, leave a voicemail all day, they'll call you back. So that happened fairly often. So he was I think, assistant fire marshal we dealt with. From an architect, we worked with Ward, W-A-R-D, Joyce.
Yeah, that name
And
rings a bell.
yep, and he's familiar with this business and the requirements of it, and so he did some drawings for us and things that we needed to submit. He was a huge help, and for even for things outside of his area, if you had questions about this, that, or the other, he often knew the people. So he was a good hub
Mm.
of information for us. Plumbing inspector was John Hammer. He was good. He came by a few times to make sure we were doing things right. The electrical inspector, I think, was John Black. I'm pretty sure the last name was Black. And again, he was great. We had everything done. It was done well.
And are
And he
these state
came in.
employees?
These are all state. Yep.
Okay, cool.
These are all Vermont state. And he came in and he tested a few things out and inspected everything. And all of those guys were really good to work with. They were really professional and we didn't hit any roadblocks with them and got everything signed off pretty quickly.
Awesome. And how about Efficiency Vermont? Can you talk about some of their program? Because I understand, from what I understand, they do different types of rebates and like buy downs or stuff like that. Do you have any details you could give us about the services that they offer?
Yeah. Gordy, you want me to do that or you want to do
Yeah,
that?
go ahead. You worked with them.
Yeah. So we reached out, and our focal point was Kathy Reynolds, and Kathy Reynolds was awesome. She's been there for a while. She knows the ins and outs, knows all the programs. She was really supportive, and one of the things about Efficiency Vermont that played in our favor was the amount of the rebate you get. It correlates to the efficiency of the equipment you're putting in.
Mm.
So high efficiency equipment tends to be more expensive, right?
Right.
And we decided to go that way. It increased our rebate monetarily, but also it helps us keep our costs down long-term electrical, especially electrical, if we're using high efficiency lights and heat pumps and all that
Yeah, and I
stuff.
understand Vermont is a very expensive electrical state, from what I'm told.
Yeah, that's one of our big monthly electrical expenses is electricity, which is why we kind of steered everything towards high efficiency, so we wouldn't be, cranking out sucking up the watts as much as we
Yeah,
we otherwise would
I have a
have.
friend who has a tier 1 indoor, and he told me his electricity bill is between $4,000 and $5,000 a month.
Wow.
Yeah, although
Yeah,
I don't think he's running the most efficient lights, but
yeah.
from some other people I've talked to at different tier levels, that does seem about right.
Yeah, I don't think ours is that high, Gordy. You recall ballpark?
I guess I should stop complaining. Our highest bill has been about 1,800 on 900 square feet, right?
Wow. Okay.
But again, I think it's all related back to the equipment, right? You pay now or you pay later, right? And so that's kind of what we did, thinking this is the right thing to do. And again, our power comes from Johnson Village. They actually have their own small electrical company right within the village there. So I think it's maybe a little bit cheaper.
Also,
But
it sounded like you guys aren't using your full 1,000 feet, so maybe that's a little bit of the cheaper factor.
no, we're not using 5 lights out of the 25 because our
Okay.
mother tents are underneath it. But the
Okay.
room is wide open, right?
Okay.
It's one 900 square foot room,
Okay.
So
I'm gonna have to come see you guys and check it out if that's okay. Yeah.
We'd
I'd
love
love
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's as far as that, it's 900 square feet in there. We don't have 900 square feet of canopy, right?
Right.
We only have about 500, and I guess we can get to what, Adam, 650 or something.
Once we expand and get the tents that have the mothers and the clones, kind of our nursery, out of there, we'll get another bench, and that'll give us another 125. So we'll get up to 625 in that room. Once we can make that bridge. And I think the other thing, Caleb, that's playing into the kind of the better electrical bill is what we did to the building envelope was spray foaming all the walls and all the ceiling and really sealing that in tight before we put up, the white tin on all of those surfaces for reflective reasons. So it's a really tight building, and that helps and puts a less burden on all that equipment.
Sure. Yeah. Which it probably is good for the life of your equipment as well, if you're not like, overdoing it or leaking
Yeah.
out everywhere. Yeah.
So to wrap up Efficiency Vermont, we had a good experience with them. They were available when we needed them. Kathy Reynolds and Ethan, I don't remember Ethan's last name, but they were really supportive in steering us towards processes and equipments, because they've got a lot of experience in refrigeration rooms and working with other cannabis companies as well. So our experience with Efficiency Vermont was good.
Great. That's great to hear. And honestly, I know I've been super critical of some of the state programs, but Efficiency Vermont seems like something I could really get behind, that's like actually helping people who need help. So
yeah, they helped us a lot.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get them on here. What do we got?
As far as Efficiency Vermont, the one thing that they pointed out to us, which was very important, right, is you got a stick-built building, right? And you're going to have a lot of moisture on the inside of that building. It cannot leak out. If it leaks out, right, we're dealing with other issues down the road, right, with stuff in the stick-built rotting, right? So that's why we did it the way we did it, and a lot of that direction came from them, right? They were, well, this is what you guys need to do, and oh yeah, that makes sense, right? And again, you don't realize how much water in just that small building, you're pumping out of there a day, really. You're not, we reuse it, right? But it's 100 gallons when you're in a full flower and you're really cranking in there. The dehumidifiers are taking out 100 gallons a day, so
You said you reuse it. Does your dehumidifiers? I've seen some of them have like a recapture for water or something.
yeah, go ahead, Adam. Yeah.
We built that. So they have they have a, these are Quest dehumidifiers. Again, we went with a good brand, high efficiency brand, and Quest had already done their own lab work that we researched before we ever bought them, which is doing water testing on the condensate that comes out of their dehumidifiers, and to make sure it doesn't have the heavy metals or anything bad in it that you wouldn't want to use for feeding your plants. So we had good confidence in that. What we did was basically we take the outputs of those and we pipe them together into kind of an irrigation cistern, you can call it that. And so we've got these reservoirs that fill up with the output of those dehumidifiers that we sanitize, and then we repump that back into our irrigation system before we mix it with nutrients to feed the plants.
When you say sanitizer, are you using like an RO system or something like that on your
No,
water?
we're not using RO. There's a Sanidate solution that we use, really low concentrations, because these cisterns, I mean, there may be a bug or a leaf or something that flies in there and bacteria gets into these things.
Sure,
Even though
yeah.
what comes out of the dehumidifiers is like deionized, it's really pure. The cisterns can capture other things,
Right.
and we want to make sure that nothing grows in there, no bad bacteria get in there. So it's just prudent to lightly sanitize that before you recover it and then start feeding your plants with it.
How's the water quality over there in Johnson?
It's been good. That was one of the first things we did was test it. It's a drilled well.
You actually did water testing.
Yeah, we did. We wanted to make sure there wasn't anything funny.
Cool.
Yeah.
And that's something I've asked a lot of people about, and a lot of people have said, and I know it's a little expensive and some people don't have the money for it, but from what I know from just all the craft brewers that I've met in my time as a bartender, they tell me that water is the most important ingredient. And I assume that if you're growing a plant, that's also going to be a big, your soil and your water are going to be like big parts of it. And I think I've seen a lot of like PFAS contamination at certain spots in Vermont. That's super concerning to me. And so I like to ask everybody how their water quality is.
Yeah. And then, I don't know if Adam talked about pH, right? But, we have, a system that automatically does that, adjusts that pH for us. So that's always being controlled and making sure we're at the right pH level.
Is that also through the dosatron?
Yeah, there's an Editron just upstream of that that does the same function. In our case, the water coming out of the well had pH was too high, so we had to drop it down. And this is a pump into a pH down mixture that does a micro dose based on the volume of water going through it, and does it. You have to calibrate it, so you set it up, and then you take a sample and you measure it to see if it's getting to where you want it, and you adjust accordingly. But once you dial it in, you can leave it there, and it's been pretty reliable.
Yeah. Now, what happens to a cannabis plant if you feed it water with a high pH?
Yeah. So everything that we've learned said 5.5 to 6.2, 6.3, somewhere in there is really where you want to be, in that neutral zone. You want to stay away from the lower acidic numbers or the higher base numbers, because they can have negative effects. So we've been able to avoid any of that by taking that advice and starting where we want to be. So we haven't had to see the negative effects of running with, a pH 8 or something like that. So I can't tell you from an experience perspective, if I run pH 8 into a bunch of plants, what it's going to do, because we stayed clear of that right from the get-go.
Well, thanks for being honest. I don't want you to blow smoke up my ass if you have no experience with that. But yeah, it's something that I've been like, honestly, I would like to I think it would be interesting to run a side-by-side test on some clones of the same plants and feed them water from different places, or, different pH levels, and see how they grow,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I bet. Oh,
go ahead,
Gordy.
one of the things with Canacrib, right? Again, it gets back to, we don't want to make mistakes that everybody else made when they got into the industry, right? That's why we thought and we value Canacrib, because they had the knowledge, they already had done the work, or had somebody had done the work and they were experts at it, right? So we went with them, and again, you know, we actually take, you know, and we introduce the pH down, but then again, once a week, we actually go check it within the substrate. Okay. And there's a process for that where we can check and we can see where we're at with the pH level. And it's just another really good way of making sure you're giving that plant what it needs to maximize the yield. It's all about the yield, right? We want, but yield is important. You know, we want other things too, right? But yield is important because that's what we sell, right?
Right.
When it gets down to it. So we probably should know why it shouldn't be, you know, something higher than 6+ or lower than 5 or whatever the right number is, right? But that work had already been done for us, and that's why we really, you know, treasure the relationship we had with Canacrib on this.
Yeah, it's nice to have, you know, there's a lot of trial and error that goes into this, and it's nice to have some people that have done that for you.
It's done it for us, exactly. You know, and
You
again,
can lose a lot of money real quick if you don't know what you're doing in this game.
and exactly, and it was expensive to use them, but it would be expensive if we didn't use them, right? So
that old catch-22.
exactly.
The other thing they were a huge help in is that we just were coming into this kind of green is the whole pest and disease management. You know, your leaves are tilted up, or they have a certain color to them, or spots on them, or you see a critter on a leaf and you're not sure if it's a good critter or a bad critter. Starting out that first grow with a set of processes for monitoring that, and then evaluating that and deciding what to do, and then being able to treat anything that you see with, you know, only organic OMRI stuff, so that you're not putting funny stuff on your plants, really was a huge benefit to us. That whole pest and disease management is kind of an art in science of itself.
Oh yeah.
And having the benefit of these guys that have worked with like 50,000 square foot businesses out west, and a lot of small businesses, and just bringing that knowledge to us as a starting point was just huge.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of the problem with plants, sometimes they're like, oh, you're either like not giving it enough water or you're giving it too much. It seems like some of those are really hard to ferret out. Like, oh, it's too much light or it's not enough light. It's like some of the problems can have like symptoms that are it make it seem like it's hard to sort of troubleshoot or diagnose what's wrong or how to fix
too
it.
much of one nutrient or not enough of another nutrient. It's
Or
complicated.
yeah, we're learning about watering right now, irrigation, right? We had one dripper, okay, in each one of our grow bags, right, for irrigation. So we were, you know, had some things going on, you know, and we started talking to these guys, and they said, can you show us some of your root balls? Okay. What we're seeing is if you have one dripper in our grow bags, where the water comes down for that dripper, you actually see more roots on one side of the grow bag versus the other side of the grow bag. Okay. So the next grow we do, we're going to go to a 2 dripper system on each grow bag. That gets you more uniform.
Even it out.
It gets it using the whole substrate now. Now using the whole substrate, again, directly, theory, we should have more yield, right? Because you're going to have bigger, better plants, stronger plants, because you got more of a root ball. So these are all kind of the things that we're learning to be able to take a small grow like we are and maximize that yield, right? You know, so but we're still learning. I mean, we're learning, and we're learning with these guys.
I feel like you're always learning in this kind of work.
Yeah, 10-4.
Yeah.
That's always going to be the case.
Yeah.
How did your first grow go? I feel like you guys said you did one already. How'd it go?
Gordy?
We were above average, what we're being told for our first grow through the consultants. So we're above average. We got room to do better within this grow space. Okay. And these are some of the things I just talked about. Maybe the, two drippers in there, gets you
Sure.
a stronger plant with more. So these are the things that we're learning as we go along. So I think we did well. As far as what we're hearing from customers, we really haven't heard one negative thing. Everybody's loved it.
Awesome.
And our second grow before it's even done is pretty much sold out. The customers have all raised their hand and we want more.
Which is sort of back to your point about making a craft product, which you never quite have enough of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's where we want to be with this small grow. So everything I think has been very, very positive with our customers. And we've heard customers say they got people driving 100 miles to get our green castle.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's exciting. I mean, and
that's what you like to hear, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
And the openings that Gordy mentioned about it being above average, that was a yield perspective. In the end, we keep track of all the yields, large bud, small bud, shake, all that. And for per square foot of canopy that we've got, how many grams of flower do we yield? Grams per square foot of canopy. And that number is your yield. And we certainly can do better there. We weren't on the high end, we weren't on the low end. We're kind of in the middle, so we can do things to improve that. But the flower that we did make, we've gotten great reviews on. People love it, and as he mentioned, our second crop isn't even done yet, and we've got everybody's coming back, and they've already put in, penciled in reservations for all those pounds of flour. So as far as we can tell, we're very likely sold out, and we haven't even processed it yet.
So you're already selling futures.
Yeah, it's in pencil. We write it down because we don't know exactly what we're going to yield.
Right, sure.
So, but it's a good problem to have when people are coming back before your crop's ready and saying they want this and that and the other, and awesome. Love to be there for you.
That's what I'm hoping to see a lot of in the Vermont market, and that's what the way it was sort of billed was as a less corporate model, a less big MSO model, like a more bottom up as opposed to like a top down giant corporate scheme.
Yep.
And I hope that we see a lot of that, because I think that at a certain scale, it's just impossible to control the quality of your product. I don't know where the line is, but there's only so much work that one person could do, or two people could, or however many you have on your team, and which gets back to sort of what I was saying earlier about people that try to scale up way too fast, and especially some of them that don't have the cultivation experience. It's not like you can grow 2 plants in your basement, in your tent, and do a great job. When you scale that up to 100, 200, 500 plants, you're dealing with a whole other order of magnitude and a whole other order of problems that I think a lot of people did not anticipate.
Exactly. You're right on. I mean, even now, there's problems that we see in a very controlled space. If you don't have the right equipment and you're not feeding properly and all of that mashed together, some of these guys got to be pulling their hair out of their head. I mean, because sometimes I wonder myself, right, Adam, with even what we got sometimes, we're dealing with things that need, but again, none of it's been something we couldn't solve, right? And we're learning as we go along.
Wait, and you can't afford to pull any hair out of your head.
Yeah. Touche.
Yeah, and as IBM guys, I assume you have a little bit of nerd tendencies, and I have a physics background, so I went to nerd school, and so I imagine for guys like you, this process is sort of analytical, where you're looking at every step of the way and checking the numbers and look at, like, hey, where could we improve this or that or the other thing? Is that accurate?
Yeah. I would say so. We're analytical, science-based, data-based. One of the points he made earlier was we have this equipment, we feed plants in a certain manner for a certain amount of time, and we think we know what it's getting into the root ball. But what you really need to do is go ask the plant, are you getting enough, by taking some measurements on it, and letting it tell you, no, I'm not getting enough nutrients, or I'm getting too much nutrients, which is another problem. And that feedback loop is kind of critical. And I don't know if everybody does that or not, but it was part of what the experience of this Canacrubs team brought to us. Said, you got to do that. What you think you're doing and what you think you're applying, you may be right on, but you may not be, and you don't know if you don't check. So checking the health of the plants and what's going on in the root balls has been kind of a weekly routine for us now, and we see surprises, things that we wouldn't have known about, and so that was a big plus for us. But it's on the analytical side. But I also think there's kind of a green thumb and artsy piece to cannabis. I don't want to
Sure.
give up on the kind of the romantic aspects. I don't want it to all be, electrons, atoms, and nutrients.
Yep.
When you look at these flowers and look at how they grow, they're freaking beautiful. They're
Mhm.
amazing. And you look at one strain on a bench and then another one right next to it, they're completely different. One is big, thick, and dense, and the other's a little more elaborate, but it's got these great blooms on it. It's just so cool. And so that kind of variation in the plants, I think is a big attraction for different clients and what they're looking for, and we can't lose sight of that.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of, at least from what I've read about your sort of endocannabinoid system and your receptors, they like that variety, and a lot of so much of American agriculture now, I feel like, is these monocrop giant industrial farms where it's like, we're going to grow one kind of Monsanto corn. And, hey, look, 20 years later, we're developing all these super pests because we have to spray them with these pesticides, and I really, I don't know if that's something you guys pay any attention to, but do you have any thoughts on sort of the scale of the agriculture here in America?
Gordy?
Sorry, that was a bit out of right field, I know.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about that, actually, really.
We'll do that one on the follow-up interview.
All right.
So I had one thought there. I do like having the variation and the smaller scales. I think there's something to be said for that. Um, where I think there may be some benefit to doing something larger at scale and kind of homogenous is for places where there's like a lot of starvation and you can't just feed enough people, there's not enough water, doing something special in those areas that maybe don't need as much water and grow more reliably and more easily, to support that group of people, that may be starving or not able to otherwise. That's one thing. But I don't feel like, at least in the US, or that we're there. I don't think we need to be homogeneous. I think the variation, there's benefit in variation, and we should strive to keep growing things with lots of variation and not making it homogeneous.
Sure, like even like with different like micro brew companies, or
Yeah.
like home brew, like we've got all these different flavors and styles and blah blah blah. It's not like, I hate to come back to corn again, but the corn industry seems like it's really down to like a monocropped sort of industry. And from what I understand, there are like 1,000 different kinds of corn, and we've basically picked like the one that Monsanto likes, and and grown that, which I think really has led to some outbreaks of pests that are hard to control. It seems like those type of monocrops are also more prone to different types of blight or diseases that could come through. And then, if you only have one strain and it's susceptible to this type of disease, it could wipe out your entire crop.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. I hear you.
Right. One of the things that we do within our grow room, right, is we are making sure that we take care of problems before we have problems when it comes to pests, right? We introduce actually mites, good mites, cannibal mites. We actually, even though we may not see a problem in our grow room, we introduce them into it. That's another thing they've taught us. Stay ahead of critters that may get into your grow.
What do the cannibal mites do?
They actually go after the bad mites, and anything else that may be in there that we don't want in there that affect, again, I keep going back to yield, right? But they're chewing on the leaves or whatever, right? You get them. You could get spider mites in there, right? You want to keep that stuff out of there, and you want to keep it under control at all times. When it comes to powdery mildew, you want to make sure you don't have a bloom of powdery mildew. So we're trying to make sure we're taking care of that before it even gets there, right? So these are all things that we've learned. You gotta do the prevent. You gotta play the defense, right? If you don't play the defense, then well, I guess I want to say it differently. If you don't play the offense, you end up being in defense all the time.
Right. Well, you said, hey, you either pay now or you pay later.
Exactly. So those are the things that we've been taught, and we've seen if you don't do it, you can get in trouble, right? So we, that's something I think was loud and clear. Wouldn't you agree, Adam?
Yeah, the whole prevention aspect, within reason, doing a few things that we have certainly can contain and have the labor force that we can do on a weekly basis just to prevent any of these issues that seem to be fairly prevalent in the industry across grow rooms and growers struggle with, just so that we can kind of keep it under control and at the same time monitoring your crop every few days, going through all your benches and looking at the leaves and under the leaves and on the stalks and making sure there's nothing walking around there that shouldn't be walking around there. All that stuff is just good practice.
Yeah. I got to say, it's a little tricky with weed to spot things like mold, like it's not like a tomato. Like we got a white spot on the tomato. That's mold. Like when you're looking at a nugget, sometimes you got to really peel it apart and get really close to the stem, it seems like, to find that mold. And it's a little bit trickier, it seems like, than most agricultural crops to spot mold on, specifically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you got that mold and it's already into that bud deep, you've got big problems. Right? So we make sure we never get there, right? If you get there, then you've got a serious problem within your crop.
Right. You might have to scrap the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
and knock on wood, we haven't had to do any of that.
Yeah.
All this preventative stuff and this proactive, that takes time and effort and money. It's been paying off, and we've been lucky to avoid those catastrophes.
Yeah.
Good.
And again, it's not cheap, introducing mites. We've been introducing mites usually twice during the grow, and it's $1,500, $2,000 every time you do that, right?
Yeah.
So it's not cheap to do it, but again, you think about what would happen if you didn't do it, right? Easily you could eat up $2,000 in your yield, right?
Cannabis. What about ladybugs? I see some people use ladybugs on their indoor grows to control pests. Is that something you guys have looked into at all?
No.
Yeah, that was a weird one. I never knew this, but apparently ladybugs are really good at eating some pests that bother cannabis plants.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. We haven't consciously introduced them, but I definitely hear your sentiment there, and I've seen a lot of testimonials from people that using them has a lot of benefit. We haven't done that on our end yet.
And my buddy buys them online for like $30, and
Yeah.
although granted he's just using his tent and he's got 5 or 6 plants at home, but
Yeah.
it seems like a very cheap option for pest management. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
One thing that we do when it takes with cost, I think the state, and we're starting to dig into this because we got a little more time now. We need to have in the state suppliers, right, that can supply us with all this equipment and the mites and the nutrients and all that stuff, because shipping is a big expense. So hopefully down the road we're going to have access to that, because that's cost a lot of money for us, because some of the stuff is coming out of California, or places like that. And then when you take mites that you have to overnight ship them, right, to Vermont, right, there's a big expense there. Sure. So hopefully down the road that may be something, if you have time to poke at and see where the industry is going on that, because there's got to be a demand. I'm trying to actually, we got I don't know if you know Johnson, but Johnson Farm and Garden right there in Johnson, yeah. Right? They've got a small line of products in there for cannabis, but Adam and I are both pro, we want to take care of the little guy around us, right? And so I'm starting to work with them about what can you get me for products, and can you get me the grow bags, and can you get me, nutrients, and can you get me the Clonex and all the other stuff we use.
Right. That way you don't have to buy it off Amazon or something, right?
Exactly, and help him out. One hand washes the other around here, right? So,
that's a good call there, Gordon. I agree with you. Like, I know it's a tricky situation right now because this is an emerging market, but definitely you're not the first person to say that. Like, yo, I want a place where I could go like buy lights or buy nutrients or seeds, even stuff like that. And I think you're spot on there, man.
Yep.
Let's see what else I got left. I wanted to zoning. It sounds like you guys didn't have any problem with that. You already had your own facility built out or that you owned, and you didn't really have any trouble there.
Yeah, I own the building. So that was big to start off with, right?
Yeah, that's huge.
And then it was just the expense of taking and turning the building into a grow room, which these poor guys that are out there, trying to build a building and then in furnishing the building, it's got to be a huge endeavor and expense.
I know some guys that have gone twice over their budget for what they thought. Some of these guys started building a while back when the lumber prices were fucking all over the place, and some of them got caught up with design issues where we didn't expect we were going to need this, so now we got to put that in, and it seems like some of the little mistakes can really add up at the end of the day in terms of cost of your total build out. And boy, some of these facilities, my dude said he was going to try to build one for $500,000. He's up over $1 million now.
Yeah, I can believe it, because I think we started we're around 150, right, Adam? Is what we figured it was going to cost us. And by the way, we did basically anything we could do, we did it ourselves. Okay. Yeah. We didn't hire anybody, unless it was an electrician or whatever, right?
Right. You need to hire a professional electrician, right?
Right, exactly. Right. So we had to do those kind of things, right? But we did basically everything ourselves on the inside of that grow room. I can't imagine hiring the labor for something like that. Now your $180,000 bill is $360,000, right?
You went about 20% over. You said 150, and then you landed at like 180.
180, right? And that was us doing all the labor, besides whatever we needed for professional. So I can't, wow. I don't know what labor is, but it's probably close to double, right? Whatever your material cost was.
Yeah, so contractors are not cheap to install that kind of gear, man.
And then find them, right? That's the other problem.
Right, and get them to show up, which I understand is also an issue.
Yeah. So you asked about zoning in particular. We kind of lucked out there. Johnson doesn't have any zoning. I know I've seen where a lot of other places and other towns are not so lucky, and they're having a lot of issues with that. We were able to, get around that in Johnson, thankfully.
Right, and you own the building, which is massive. Yeah. It sounds like as long as your landlord is cool with what you're doing, like I have some other friends that have warehouses that are rented out to them, and as long as the landlord is cool with it. So owning your own building seems like really like a godsend in this industry right now.
Yeah, okay. And the town was really good to work with too. They were cannabis friendly.
Have they established a local control board in Johnson?
I think that's what they call it. Yeah, they got a local cannabis control board that basically developed I think we were the first ones that went to them. So nice. They put that in place. It's really part of the select board team anyways, but
right. Okay.
But we got through there, and then that was it with the town. We were good to go.
Yeah. And I see, I think Jeffersonville has also set up a local control board. I know Barry has in a number of other towns.
Right.
So no hassle there, huh? I've heard some other people kind of saying that was just an extra layer of kind of bullshit they had to deal with, but it sounds like you guys breezed right through, huh?
It wasn't a breeze. We had to go get in front of the zoning board and stuff, and and they did a vote, and it was pretty close, but we got through it. So yeah, yeah.
Okay. What about I'm almost at the end here. I wanted to ask you guys about lawyers. Have you worked with any of Vermont Cannabis Solutions or Dave Silberman or any of those guys, or did you do all this stuff yourselves?
Uh, we did we use cannabis solutions.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, my wife is a professional, and she did a lot of the paperwork stuff.
Well, get her in here, Gordon.
she, she again, you know, kind of chewed through that pretty easily. It was just like I get back to the same old problem. Ask me for one thing, and then a week later, ask me for something else. That was the really the only drawback we had there. But no, she handled most of that.
Cool. That must have been nice. That's just a headache for me.
Yeah, you know, some of these guys, it seemed like I was like, holy smokes, we were lucky because, you know, just like Cambridge down there, right? They just got their license, you know, and I was talking to them, you know, I was talking to Dusty, and
Yep.
and you know, when you get your license, you know, and they kept, oh, it's gonna be, we think another week, or it's gonna be another 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
it just
I've
kept
been
dragging on.
following Dusty through that whole process, and you know, it looked stressful.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You know, it looked like, oh my goodness, I'm glad we didn't have those problems.
He's such a great guy too. You know, it just
Yeah.
hurt. It hurt to see him like, you know, stressing like that.
Yeah, exactly. But he, you know, I talked to him the other day. They're zinging along now,
Oh yeah,
and
looks like business is going good down there.
yeah, yeah, and they're looking for some green castle in there. So yeah, it's good.
So, can I ask you guys where we might find some of your flour? Do you have any retailers you'd care to shout out, or if you'd like to keep that secret, that's fine too. But I'd love to know where we could find some of your flour if you're willing to share.
Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, so we definitely do have flour out there. I don't know how much they have left from the first grow that you know, if you walked in there today, until we get this next grow done and out the door. But some of the places that we've been working with, Green State Garden, Green State Dispensary in Burlington. We're working with Mountain Girl down in Rutland.
Yeah.
We've been talking with, but haven't yet sourced from Jeff White at Burn. We're planning on doing that when he opens, and I think he's actually reserved some stuff already, so that's going to happen on Main Street, right in Burlington. And in addition to just getting it directly to those places, we've been, and this is something I wanted to mention earlier. We've been working with a wholesaler with Northern Craft Cannabis with Lauren LePage and Levi and their team, and they've been awesome.
Oh, they're
So they get it to
fantastic, man.
they're great. They get it to a whole bunch of other places than the ones that we've been dealing directly with. So we've kind of got a model where there's like a handful of places we deal directly with. We had those relationships established, and then for those places that don't have their own packaging, you know, we've been working with Northern Craft Cannabis and getting it out there, you know, that way. And one of the things I wanted to make is, at least right now, whether you're talking with a retailer or whether you're talking with wholesalers, everybody so far that we've been dealing with has been playing nice together. It really is kind of a community vibe. Everyone's been very helpful and very supportive, even if we don't go through them. You know, if we talk to one wholesaler and they say, well, I don't need it now, but try these other people. It's all been really supportive and trying to get this thing off the ground and established. It hasn't been cutthroat. So
That's great to
we're
hear,
really
man.
we're psyched to see that and hope it stays that way. I don't know if it will, but everybody we've been dealing with it has been that way, and recommending other places, even if they're competitors. You know, it's been really cool, and we definitely would like to see that trend continue. We're going to try to.
Me too. I think
it.
I think if you're going to keep the corporate sort of influence out of Vermont, the state is so small. Like cooperation, I believe, is fully necessary to protect the small growers in this state.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yep.
agree. I agree.
Word
The other
up.
place was Valley Mead in Waitsfield with Aaron and team down there.
Oh yeah, that's
I think
a new joint.
new joint, you know, outside the ski area. I think they're sold out of our stuff, but a great place, good guys. And I like their pricing model. They have if you've ever skied, you've got black diamonds and green circles and blue squares for ski slopes. They have the same thing. They have a pricing chart. Black diamond is this much, and green circle and blue, and it's all taxes included. So the thing I liked about their model was, as a consumer, if you walk in there and you buy an eighth of something, and you see the price of it, you don't get surprised at the register with the taxes that you hadn't planned on. It's all included right there. And I think that's kind of a cool way to do it.
I appreciate that, honestly, because the taxes are a little bit outrageous, if you ask me. And I'd rather just know what I'm paying off the bat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a couple friends that have actually complained to me about, I went in and I bought something and, they said 55 and then I walked out of there, it was 68 or something, right? Stuff like that, right? So I like that pricing scheme, and right up front, okay, this is what it cost me, and then they can make a decision.
Yeah, and I wish that the retailers would sort of come to a consensus on this, and everyone would do it, because some places, and whatever, you can run your business however you want, but some places don't include the tax and some places do, and it's a little confusing. As just a dumb custy like I am. I want to know, just tell me how much I'm leaving out the door.
Yeah,
that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, that's where I would be too.
Yeah. I don't care. I don't want to find out later. It drives me nuts that taxes on cannabis are 20% and alcohol is 10%. I find that to be kind of ridiculous, personally.
Now, hopefully they'll go back and look at that at a later date.
Well, we'll hope in one hand.
Yeah. Positive vibes. Positive vibes.
Hopefully alcohol doesn't say, hey, they're getting 20%, we're going to make it 20%.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. I don't want to put any ideas in their head. Yeah. Fuck. Damn it. I hope alcohol's not listening to this.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said anything.
No. Hey, look, Adam McPadden, Gordon Horner, I'm out of questions for you guys. I want to thank you both so much for your time. This has been a fascinating interview here. I always leave the last word for my guests. So if there's anything we missed, any shameless plugs you want to throw out there or shout outs, now is the time. And thank you, gentlemen, again. This has been a pleasure.
Well, if there's anything for me, it's come see us. I think you'd be impressed what we're doing. Again, we're small, but we have the technology and what we're growing. I'm very excited about. Yeah, I think that's about it. And let us know sometime. We'd love to have you stop in.
I will.
And for me, I think I want to reiterate, the industry in Vermont is still playing nice together and supporting each other. I want to, do what we can to help make sure that happens. And I want to say thank you, Caleb, for what you're doing and trying to get the word out there. Yeah. You are one busy SOB with all of the interviews you've got and posting these things, and that one you had with that tax woman. So really cool what you've been up to.
Oh,
and
Victoria?
So, good luck keeping this up and keep going, man.
Yeah.
She's amazing, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. This has been a pleasure. I'm about 5 days backed up, so this will be out next week sometime. But thank you so much, and good luck with everything, guys.
All right. Take care, bud.
Peace.
Yep.